Expat Dad here. Today we're going to talk about the deep-rooted hostility between the U.S. and Iran. We need to look at how not so long ago, the United States and Iran were actually geopolitically aligned against the Soviet bloc. But today, as you can see, there's a lot of deep-rooted hatred and distrust, and we're going to talk about what the heck is going on and how that will probably affect their relationship moving forward. I'm going to start with a little history lesson, which I think plays a major role into explaining what's happening today. So first, we're going to look at Iran. So imagine a desert. You don't have to imagine it. If you live one, just look outside. But imagine a desert region. There are two critical things that are quite important. One is terrain. So you know how in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, as they say. Well, in the land of the thirsty and non-defensible regions, the kingdom, or rather the people with defensible regions and access to consistent water, is king. Or in the case was how Persia was formed, arguably they call it, there's some debate, but hear me out. So there's a region in the Zagros Mountains where water was consistent, precipitation was consistent, and so the people who lived there had access to water and to the mountains, and that allowed their population to grow and create agriculture and expand. And expand they did. And through having access to consistent food, they could spend time thinking about new things and engineering, which they did, and they created what's called qanats. And those are underground water systems that the Persians were able to use to expand their empire. All right, so for the longest time, the Middle Eastern region was under Persian control, and a big reason why was because they had created this waterway system. The reason why I'm mentioning this part is because we have to understand the Persian mindset. As far as the Iranians, how they see themselves as an empire in their minds, right? They're not used to, or they've never been really conquered by anyone, although you could argue they were conquered by the Muslims, but that was, by the, not even by the Arabs, but by the Muslims, and they became Muslim themselves. But that's another story. So that's Iran. Now let's talk about the United States. On one corner you had Iran, the other corner, the United States. The United States is a power that, after World War II, realized that the policy of isolationism didn't work. Unfortunately, even if America decided to stay out of it, quote unquote, or stay out of the world's problems, eventually the problems would find themselves at America's front yard. So after World War II, the threat at the time that was perceived, and it was arguably genuine, depends on who you talk to, was the Soviet Union, the Soviet threat. And this is after having dealt with a surprise attack from Japan and a declaration of war from a mightier Germany. And this gave the American people the understanding, and the government the understanding, that we had to nip these problems in the bud over there, overseas, right before they became something that we dealt with in America. And that's why the response to 9/11, or I argue the response to 9/11 was to go over there and nip things in the bud there, was to prevent it from growing into anything that could be then sent to the United States. So how does this play right now? Persia, or Iran, we'll call it Iran, had a lot of water, agriculture, but it didn't have industry. So it was ripe for the plucking, really, in an era of imperialism. So what happened was they found oil in Iran, and there was one particular empire that was interested in said oil, which is the British Empire. And sure enough, they took it. They took that oil, they put in a puppet government, or they made a deal, with the Iranians for that oil, because, and there's nothing really the Iranians could do because the British had the imperial industrial might until the 1950s, where British were weak, and the Iranians were in a position to get their oil back. So then the British, understanding that the American fear of losing to the Soviets was something that the Americans were dealing with at the time, got the Americans to side with them against Iran. And sure enough, they did. They ousted the Prime Minister, Mohammed Mossadegh, and they put in the Shah. So the Shah was not liked by the Iranians, was liked by the Americans. So that created a bit of a bit of tension between the Americans and the Iranians. And then at one point, the Shah was ousted. Well, he left the country, and used against the United States in any way, shape, or form is traumatizing for the American people. And that's why we are in this today. And moving forward, what will happen? Most probably there will be a ceasefire, but I doubt that it would be anything more than that, because the Iranian regime and the American administration do not trust each other, and they will not. Now, will there be a toppling of the Iranian regime? That maybe so. It could happen. It could not happen. But the question today is, where does this deep-rooted hostility come from? So in short, it comes from two powers having different ideas for what is to happen in the Middle East. It comes from two powers that have had misunderstandings and tensions for the last 100 years, give or take, maybe 80 years. And it comes from fundamental differences in umbrella and allow the United States to prosper through that trade, whereas Iran wants to call the shots for its own region. Anyway, that's all for today. Thank you for listening. Any questions, comments, please post them below. I look forward to hearing from you. That's all for now. Bye-bye.